I'd like to call this meeting, the special board meeting on our budget, to order. First item on the agenda is Resolution 06181933, adoption of the unified budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. Mr. Guidry.
Yes, so we're at that's the point of the budget adoption process where we're presenting all of the budgets, proposed budgets that have been presented to the board during the preceding budget meetings. So at this point, we're asking the board to adopt unified budgets for fiscal year 18-19. So basically, these would be the proposed budgets that have been presented to the board. We're asking that the board approve them, adopt them as a unified budget. Right. Ask if there are any questions or comments.
Any questions, comments by the board? Mr. Broussard.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve adjusting the proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget to reflect the restoration of the funding of the school safety officers in the amount of $365,526.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on the motion to restore the funding for the school safety officers? Any board member comment or questions? Mr. Hidalgo.
Yes, Mr. President. First of all, the restoration shouldn't be just specific to school security officers, because the motion was not specific to that. The motion was to allow a principal to make a FTE cut on their campus equivalent to that of the pay of that school security officer position. I have just recently learned, as an example, right now there are some classes, I'll take Southside for example. Right now there's a world geography class that unless teachers are added to that campus, they're going to have more than 75 students in one class. That's just one class. So speaking to the principal and looking at the enrollment as of today, they are 5 teachers, school teachers, short on their campus based on increased enrollment. I know Acadiana High has increased enrollment as well, but I think that it's going to wash out for them because I think they're getting maybe some transfers from Lafayette High. The point that I'm trying to make is I doubt that Southside will be the only school who will have an enrollment issue, who will possibly need more staff or more appeals. As of this time, the superintendent doesn't have any appeals. We stripped him all away from him. Well, he's got the 5 positions for the librarians, which I would imagine will also be brought up. But even those 5 positions district-wide, we've seen in years past many appeals needed and or wanted throughout the district. So how are we going to address the learning environment when he has no appeals, and as of right now they're short that many teachers on that one campus? I would prefer to see educators and teachers in the classroom. I started off intending to ask for SSOs to be removed, but the motion was clear that we allow the principal to make a cut on their campus. One of my fellow board members made a comment that I don't have SSOs in my district, so what does it matter to me? Well, I tell you what it matters. That means that you have more resources on your campus than I do, and so how is that a fair gig for the students in each respective district? So I would like to make a substitute motion that the board approves adjusting the proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget to reflect the restoration of 5 appeals for the superintendent for in the amount of, let me get that amount right quick, $335,000.
We have a substitute motion and second. And we'll ask you to repeat it because I can't repeat it.
It's kind of the same motion. It's that the board approves adjusting the proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget to reflect the restoration of 5 appeal positions to the superintendent in the amount of $335,000.
Do you have any public comment on this item? Any board member comment? Madam Secretary, call for the vote on the substitute motion. So for the audience, I just want to explain what's going on right now. We're about to vote on a substitute motion that, if that motion passes, the previous motion will basically in effect have failed. If this motion does not pass, then we'll revert back to the original motion for consideration.
Three for, 5 against, 1 abstain.
All right, the motion, that motion failed, so we are back to the original motion. Madam Secretary, can you put that one back up on the monitor? And for the public, I'm going to read this again. It says that the motion is that the board approves adjusting the proposed FY 18-19 general fund budget to reflect the restoration of funding for the school safety officers in the amount of $365,526. So if there's any public comment on this item, any board member comment on this item? Mr. Hidalgo.
Opening comment. This will be my closing comment, Mr. President. We just voted not to put more teachers in the classroom and possibly restore the SSOs when we know we're about to put additional school security officers in our schools. I don't know why in the world. Yes, I do. I know why we would do something like that. I'm just sad that we made a decision that We're already 40 behind. How many appeals are we behind from last year? 18. So we're 18 appeals behind from last year, 18 appeals behind from last year, and we're going to several of us, including the superintendent, not in these words, have already agreed that there are many inefficiencies that we can work on campuses, and some overpaid positions, and some positions that are saying they're doing this but they're doing something else, and we're gonna vote against putting teachers in the classroom when an opportunity arises, and we're gonna restore what is arguably an inefficiency on our campus. I just wanted to comment.
Mr. Latchley.
Dr. Aguilar, do you expect an increase in enrollment in the parish?
I really have no way of knowing what to expect. I think realistically, based on last year's trends, we ended up with about 150 additional students. It's reasonable to expect that we might have as many as that number. It's just impossible to predict at this point.
So with increased enrollment comes increased MFP, which comes increased revenue, which can fund teaching appeals, which is, I think, was what was originally stated when the appeals were removed to put in the SRO program. And I don't think too many people had a problem taking those appeals away at the time. So, and some people didn't have a problem with teaching positions going away to keep an SSO. I did, yeah, SSO. I get the SRO and SO mixed. So, there you have it.
Bruce, sir.
I can understand the difference of opinion, but in my opinion, the SRO and the SSO brings two different things to the table. The teachers and administrators in the school is very well needed and respected, but the SSOs bring a different talent to the table and most needed in the school that I represent. They are the go-between, they are the counselors, they are the teachers, they are the person that a lot of our children turn to for support. They bring a different animal to the table.
Any other board member comment? Madam Secretary, I call for the vote.
Five for, 3 against, 1 abstain.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is Safety Initiative School Resource Officer Program.
Mr. President.
Oh, excuse me.
We have a couple more items.
Oh, excuse me. Mr. Centani.
I move that the board approves adjusting the proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget to reflect the restoration of 5.5 librarians in the amount of $396,000.
We have a motion by Mr. Centani, excuse me, a second by Ms. Morrison for the restoration of 5.5 librarians for a budget revision of $396,000. Any public comment on the restoration of the librarians?
My name is Chantel Lapinto. I am the second librarian at Acadiana High School, where I've been teaching for 12 years. I have 20 years of English experience, and this was my first year this last year in the library. I sent each of you a couple of days ago the portfolio that I created based on the work that I contributed to the school's academic progress over the last 10 months. It's about 70 pages long and includes a lot of information that I feel that maybe people aren't aware of what librarians do at the high school level. I understand that there's a big focus on helping the students at Karen Crowe High School and Northside High School, and I agree wholeheartedly, and that's why those schools were allowed to keep their second librarian. But at Acadiana High School, with having over 1,700 students, we have that exact same population at Northside at our school. We have a growing and increased ESL population with very severe literacy deficiencies, with whom I worked one-on-one with over the last year. We have over 600 computers that one-to-one devices that the library is responsible for. I taught many classes throughout the year, each of the 9 to 10 months of school, helping students with academic research, helping students with learning how to search online for credible sources. Morning, lunch, and after school, I help students one-on-one with their literacy needs, with assignments for projects. Meanwhile, as my co-librarian and I are switching off, we need somebody behind the desk who's constantly meeting the needs of students coming in, of teachers coming in, of administrators coming in, needing some of the tens of thousands of resources that we have on the school campus. With one librarian in 1,800 schools, the library will function as a shell of what it does now. And I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that before making any final decisions. Thank you.
I'm a little shorter than she is. I'm Amanda Blanco, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. I graduated from Acadiana High in the class of 2000. I then proceeded to teach at Acadiana High for 7 years before becoming librarian at Prairie Elementary, and now I'm currently the second librarian at Lafayette High. I am the president of the Lafayette Parish Association of School Librarians, and I'm currently the second vice president for the Louisiana Association of School Librarians. So I am representing all librarians, not just for our district, but for our state as a whole, and the importance that we have in literacy and helping students close the achievement gap. One of the things that we're able to do with a fully staffed library in the high schools is that we can work one-on-one with students in places and areas that teachers aren't able to. They can come to us and we can help them with research, with projects. We can help them to find books to read on their levels so that they can grow and develop those literacy skills that they desperately are needing. So I really hope that you take that into consideration whenever you vote.
Any other, excuse me, any other public comment on the restoration of the 5.5 librarian positions? Any board member comment? Mr. Angel.
Yeah, I have a comment. I don't have a problem supporting the librarians wherever they were. But I have a concern, and I asked a question the other night, and you know, when the teacher comes to school, the kids come to her class or his class day one, 25, 30 kids per class, day one. And the librarian, they get 2 weeks to get ready for the school year, and then at 2 weeks before the school ends, they send the kids back to the classroom so they can close for the school year. And my question, I guess, is when you spend the last 2 weeks of the year, you know, checking everything and closing everything and making sure everything's done right and books are accounted for and everything, why does it take 2 weeks at the beginning of school to do it all over again when you spent the last 2 weeks of the school year closing everything out and doing whatever has to be done? It seems to me, and I'm gonna vote for this motion, but it just seems to me that I would like to see the librarians arrange that closing and opening so that more of our kids can go to the library more than 8 months out of the 9 months. 10% of the time our kids can't go to the library because they're getting ready for the next phase or whatever it is. I just think that's too much time that's keeping our students from the library.
Any excuse me, any other board member comment before we take the vote? Ms. Morris.
I guess the issue that I have is at a previous meeting, and this is typical for a class of employees to get up and tell us how important they are to the system, and I have no doubt that they are. But the issue that I have is that when there's a librarian that I have knowledge of who spends time during the school day on her personal Facebook page, I have a really hard time buying into the story about how busy she is in the library. So I'm just making the comment now to make any of those librarians who do those sorts of things aware that we're aware of those types of behaviors in the library, and they need to focus on what they're telling us they're focused on, which is library work and not personal stuff.
Thank you. Mr. Hidalgo.
Yeah, just a quick observation, and Dr. Aguilar, correct me if I'm wrong here. I voted not to eliminate the librarians the last go around, but I just do want to say that if this vote passes, that takes your whopping five appeals and brings it to 0. Isn't that correct? Yeah.
Mr. Centani.
I'd like to correct a pretty blatant false statement just now, in that this in no way modifies any. Well, Dr. Aguilar, I'd like to point out that the budget that was presented to us at the 4 o'clock meeting, other board members, at the very bottom line, on the very last page of the budget, there was an $871,000 surplus. I made no motion. The motion a month ago was made to 5.5 librarian positions, $396,000 to the appeals line item. This motion says nothing about appeals. Restoring this funding right here will simply reduce the $871,000 surplus that did not exist last month, which is why we initially made the cut. Now it does exist, and I would much prefer spend this money on librarians than have it sit there unused as a surplus. So, to make a factual correction, does nothing to appeals. This simply restores the 5.5 librarians that we eliminated last month.
Ms. Morrison.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of piggyback of what Ms. Morris said. The librarians, if you have any downtime, just kind of be creative in what you can do to help the kids. And I know there's one teacher that's on Facebook. It doesn't mean that every librarian in Lafayette Parish is on Facebook. So to have one to do something like that reflects upon all of you. So be creative, use your time wisely. In the classroom, help out with the other teachers, the principals, or something. But no one should have time to play on social media. And I'm not saying it happened, it didn't happen, but if you did it and thinking about doing it, and stop and just be creative and use that time in the classroom. Thanks.
All right, any other board member comment? Mr. Guidry? Dr. Aguilar.
And I'm gonna ask Mr. Guidry for assistance here. My understanding is that we were making some administrative recommendations to the budget in anticipation of the agenda item discussing school safety. We were building up the necessary money to be able to fund that initiative. And so if we're pulling money out of that bottom line item, we are going to be shorter and shorter from the goal that was expressed to Mr. Guidry and I.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, I call for the vote.
7 for, 2 against.
Mr. Stani.
Mr. President, I move that the board approves adjusting the proposed fiscal year 18-19 general fund budget to reflect restoration of adjustment for elementary PE teachers and paras in the amount of $284,000.
Second.
A motion and a second to restore the elementary school PE teachers and paras. Any public comment on this? And I'll wait as well for the motion to be on the... There we go. So the motion is that the board approves adjusting the proposed FY 18-19 general fund budget to reflect restoration of adjustment for elementary PE teachers and paras in the amount of $284,000. Any public comment? Any board member comment? Dr. Chasson.
I got a question. With the suggestions being, the suggestions aren't a binding agreement, so we don't have to vote on this because it hasn't taken place, right?
Mr. Santana?
All of these, the list you have in front of you, all of those items were included in the budget presented at the 4 o'clock meeting.
Okay.
And I discussed this with Mr. Guidry before this meeting, whether we needed to make individual motions to accept those recommendations or motions to reject those recommendations. And it was both of our opinions that they're already in the budget document, so if we want them, we don't have to make a motion to accept them. That'll be taken care of when we adopt the budget. If we do not want them, there needs to be a motion to actually remove them from the budget document as presented.
Okay.
Any other board member comment before we take the vote? Madam Secretary, I call for the vote.
Seven for, 2 against.
Motion carries. That concludes. I'll just look around. Are there any other motions from board members on this? All right. Next item on the agenda. Oh, excuse me.
I was. There's one last one that we have to do, Mr. President. I move that the Lafayette Parish School Board approves Resolution 06-18-1933, adopting the unified budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. as revised to reflect adjustments approved during the June 13th, 2018 special board meeting.
Second.
Give it to Ms. Morrison.
A motion and a second, and I'll wait for it to be on the monitor before I read it to you. But it's basically a motion to adopt the budget with the revisions of tonight. With that, if anybody wants to make any public comments on that, please make your way to the podium. All right, any board member comments? Madam Secretary, call for the vote. I'll go ahead and read the motion that the Lafayette Parish School Board approves Resolution 06181933, adopting a unified budget for fiscal year 2018-2019 as revised to reflect adjustments approved during the 6/13 special board meeting.
8 for, 1 against.
Motion carries. Mr. Guidry, on the next item, you mentioned that no action is required on this item.
We'll come back to the board at that point. It's working here. Staff will come back to the board when we're further along in the contractual process.
All right. That concludes the business of this special board meeting. Thank you.